Dude, I am so tired.
What time do you get up?
Yeah, like big ass bags under my eyes. I got up at like 7:30. No, I got up at like 8. But I didn't really go to sleep till like 1:30 or 2. Um, and just been like these protests are fucking exhausting, man. Like you're like standing still or like marching, not knowing if a cop is about to like fuck with you.
Yeah.
Like for like hours. Plus, like in between everything, I'm like organizing and driving out to the fucking like West Bank or out to like Kenner or wherever the fuck we were today. Like,
I
I'm
find
tired, man.
I find Jefferson Parish cops to be so much scarier than NOPD. I mean, all cops are shitty, but those dudes are crazy. They're like not only are we too racist to live in New Orleans, we're also too racist to work in New Orleans. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I mean they're they're killers. Like, uh,
Yeah, I think Susanna was telling me that they shoot the most people of any parish, of any police department in Louisiana.
I went to this meeting with like some of the organizers of the protests that like went on in front of the sheriff's office, like for Modesto Reyes.
Uh huh.
And this lady who I was sitting next to, she was like, she was getting pissed because everyone was like talking over each other.
Yeah.
And then this other lady who I knew like a little bit better, like looked at me and she was like, "Oh, don't like, you got to forgive her. She's gonna be upset. The cops killed her whole family."
Jesus Christ. Yeah, that's fucking grim.
Yeah, man.
I'm gonna.
I think you got there like right after the speeches today, right?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, man. There was like a mom who lost her kid, and then a son who lost his dad that both spoke, and like I'm fucking bawling. I was like trying to
Yeah.
like keep it together. And like, you don't want to be like the center of attention when
Right.
some shit like that is
Totally.
happening, but it's like, fuck, I can't not just weep. Like this shit is intense.
Let me shoot the invites real quick. Yeah, WWL posted the speeches on YouTube, so I watched them when I got home.
Hmm.
Let's see. Going to forward this shit to.
Oh, do you know if it's Uetricht?
I have
Is
no
that how you
idea.
say it?
I bet I bet Susanna knows because she listens to his podcast. One second, I'll go ask. Susanna says she do not remember, but she thinks so.
It's how someone starting a job interview with his mom would start. So
How?
I see Uetricht.
Okay.
I'm tired, man. I'm tired. I got nothing. Dude,
Maybe
you gotta be
maybe I
funny for
shouldn't
this
start
one.
recording when you log on. Maybe I should wait till everybody's here. No, I'm just kidding. Oh shit! What else? What else was I gonna ask you? What did you have a burrito afterward?
I did have a burrito.
How was it?
It was good.
Yeah.
I think they put like sauerkraut in it because punks can't not put sauerkraut and
Right.
stuff.
Yeah.
But it was appreciated, you know.
Yeah. Shit. I'm looking at MD's uncle, mom's uncle. I just saw that update that she gave us about great uncle. Yeah. Fuck.
Yeah.
I feel really weird. Like I have been seeing my mom every weekend in a socially distanced hangout, and I don't think I'm gonna do it for a couple weeks after the protest stuff. Although I didn't show up to shit except for this. But yeah.
Yeah, man. I mean, we were like sardines the other night on
On the bridge?
fucking, yeah, like could not move. Like it was so unhelpful because there was all this like white allies to the front shit, which is like good.
Right.
People should do that, but like unless some people move back, white allies to the front means a bunch of white people get in a fucking log jam, so that way when they shoot tear gas, everyone almost like
Dies. Yeah.
tramples each other.
Yeah.
So it's like I don't know. You gotta have like it's so hard because everyone's so unprepared, but it's like that's a tactic and it needs to be used effectively and understood. Like it should be
Yeah.
like, why don't we designate certain white people to be in certain areas?
Yeah.
But like that takes such coordination and like some of these things seem like very spontaneous as to like what exit or like on ramp like people are going up
Yeah.
and when it's just sort of like let's go that way like
Yeah. Dude, Jeff posted this the other day, and I'd also been thinking about it. This happened in Dallas. I think it happened in Atlanta. It happened in Brooklyn, and it happened here. This like trapping protesters on a bridge and then gassing them. Like, is this how the fuck are we getting on bridges in the first place? And like, why? You know what I mean?
I mean it's a disruption. It's
Well,
like
no, I mean for sure, but you can also disrupt I-10. You know, like and not be. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I guess there's no.
I mean I-10 though is like also way above the street.
Yeah, but isn't it significantly wider?
It's wider. I mean it wasn't I mean we did go on
Yeah.
I-10 like and I don't know. I was like mildly concerned about people falling off,
Yeah.
but I was still like I was concerned.
Yeah, I'm not
Like,
talking specifically about falling off, just like how easily trapped you are on a narrow, like on a relatively narrow bridge. Megan's here. I'm admitting her right now. On a relatively narrow bridge like that. I mean, like, it seems like it just keeps happening. Hey, Megan, what's
Hello,
up?
everybody.
How are
what's
you
up?
doing?
Hi. It's good to see you
Welcome
guys.
back. Good to see
you.
you. Looks like we're still waiting on Mary Devon and Micah.
Yeah, but
Got a lot of. I'm the only non-M in this interview.
I guess
You gotta
you
get
have
out.
to log off.
Get out of
dude.
here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is not my space.
Have you guys been protesting?
Yeah, we're just talking about that. Talking about getting kettled and various like the kind of like tactical strategy it takes to not be completely fucked and overrun. But I mean, I think where I fall on that is like there's a lot you can know, there's like a lot of discipline you can have, but like ultimately, unless you outnumber the cops by like a bajillion to
Yeah.
one, it's like you, there's no amount of tactical discipline knowledge you can really have.
Yeah.
You just have to completely overwhelm them by like numbers.
Yes.
We were talking specifically about getting trapped on bridges because that happened to people in New Orleans. It happened in Brooklyn. It happened in
that.
Dallas, and like and seems like it's a lot easier for the cops if they only have to cut off 2 lanes in terms of numbers. You know.
That's why they're doing that. I saw that. I saw the videos from New Orleans. They're just like, did they gas you on the bridge too? Or gas people in New Orleans on the bridge? That's what I remember. I mean, I've watched so many videos. I don't know if you guys have seen, but I've been like trying to compile like written lists of all the horrible things the cops have done, and it's created I feel like the term that keeps coming up for me is like I feel like emotionally dizzy. Like I feel dizzy, but like emotionally.
Yeah.
And so I can't keep track of everything, but I do remember seeing that people were gassed on a bridge in New Orleans. It's looked bad. It looked about as bad as the Philly. They gassed those protesters up against the side wall in Philly. Did you guys see that video?
Mm-mm.
I didn't see it.
They basically, so some people took a highway and then the police blocked them off and then gassed them. I don't know why I'm laughing. It's not fucking funny, but we gassed them. And then they were trying to run away, and they ended up running sort of up this like hill on the side of the highway that they couldn't. I was fenced in, and they couldn't get over it, and it was like causing a crowd crash.
Yeah,
so fucking dangerous.
And people are just like going like this, like trying to get up the wall or something. They can't get up the wall.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that there's a constant theme of like using tear gas in a way that it's not meant to. So tear gas is meant to disperse crowds theoretically.
Right.
Not that I would endorse it for that purpose either, but like when you use it when people are trapped, then you are using it clearly just as like an instrument of torture, you know?
Oh yeah, I mean, you can't disperse people when there's nowhere to go.
Right.
Like it's
At that point, you're
insane.
just waterboarding them, but it's more unpleasant.
I mean, and like the other night on the bridge, like that bridge is high as fuck up. Like people so easily. Like I'm surprised no one fell off.
I am too, and I'm also really. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hello.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also very impressed at like how quickly everyone on the bridge realized that they shouldn't run, even though everyone's face was melting off. Like everyone,
I saw
everyone
the video.
started to run, and then like we were so scared for 1 second, and then everyone by us was like, "Oh shit, we shouldn't run," and so we just all walked, and we're like,
yeah.
I'm impressed with that too. I watched the video and I remember seeing like, it looked like it caused like an immediate panic. But if that had continued, it would have been really dangerous. So that's really impressive.
Yeah. I personally almost accidentally jumped off the bridge because I thought that the ramps were connected. So I was like about to step over, and some guy was like, "Don't try to jump it," because he thought that I thought I was Spider-Man, and I really didn't see that there was like a 6-foot gap between bridges.
Yeah.
You were like, "Jump it? What is it?"
Yeah, I was like, "What? I'm just gonna hop over." Obviously.
Yeah. You thought you were regular man, but you were dumb man. Shit. But
I mean,
those guardrails are super low.
Meagan, you were saying you're like, why am I laughing? But it's like, I mean, you can't discount that like this is extremely traumatizing and physically painful and like actually putting people's lives in jeopardy, and it's a reaction to something that's like way, way worse than that. I mean, like, extrajudicial murder like being completely normalized all the time, explicitly, to one race. Like it's so fucking horrible. But like at the same time, like there is like this weird thing where like you're in it, and then once you take a step back from it and you are like back to, if you can get to any place of like comfort, it's hard not to be like, that was some Looney Tunes shit. Like that was crazy. Just like
absolutely.
Everyone's just on their like yakety sax fucking like clubs. Like like how people are acting is just so truly absurd that like it's hard not to laugh at sometimes, even though it's like the most horrific thing.
Right.
One of the most horrific things there is.
Are you guys already recording?
Yes.
Good. No, that's good. That's good. We should, because I was going to say we should talk about this like on the podcast.
Yeah.
But yeah. I mean, that's like, look, it's good to also find a little bit of levity. Like I said, I've been watching just like, literally just for work for Jacobin. I've been like glued to the computer and watching videos to like try to understand what was happening, to figure out how to describe them in these pieces that I've been writing. And, honestly, like it's a good, nice feeling of relief when you have like Philadelphia Police Sergeant Joey Baloney as the person behind the baton. Like it's helpful, right?
Yeah. And there's also just like something funny in our household is that I'll do something immensely shitty and stupid and inconsiderate or something, and Susanna will say, "Come on, man," and it's like that kind of laughter where it's like, "Come on," It is genuinely funny how ridiculous it is. Yeah. Anyway.
So I guess we should, since we never do, should introduce our guests. Also, Micah, you can totally unmute.
Yeah.
Like, this is we're like pro interrupting.
Yes.
My like Jewish nature has sort of infected everyone with that. So like, just yell, talk over. But
I'm also very rude culturally. So.
Yeah, we're bad people. We're not good.
See, I'm insanely goyish and find interrupting people extremely uncomfortable. So the chances I will do that are very low.
Micah's going to be in the side chat, like writing like stack and never.
Yeah, we run progressive stack, and as probably the the most goyish and well-employed white guy on the podcast, where you're just not you don't get it.
You invited Micah on explicitly to silence him, just to like increase the cred of the podcast.
Of our extremely white podcast.
I deserve it.
But so we got returning champ, Meagan Day, and Micah Uetricht. Am I saying your name right?
You got it. Incredible. You first try. I didn't even warn you ahead of time when I was saying it. Amazing.
I mean, I was sure I was going to be wrong, but we got it.
You got it. Yeah.
Yeah. Co-authors of Bigger Than Bernie and staff writers and editors, right, at Jacobin?
Meagan is a staff writer, and I am the deputy editor.
Sweet. Welcome. Thank y'all for coming. Yeah, I guess, like, Micah, have you been out at anything? You're in Chicago, right?
Yeah, I'm in Chicago. I was at a huge march yesterday. There were about 8,000 people just west of downtown, in downtown Chicago, near downtown Chicago. And it was I've been to several protests before that. I don't know if this is the case in many other, I think in other large cities at least, there are usually like 3, 4, 5 protests seeming happening in the same city at one time. So I've gone to the neighborhood level ones. But yesterday was the first citywide one, and it was massive, and it was a really incredible thing to witness.
Well, I've told Micah this before, but I moved to Los Angeles, and my theory is that Los Angeles and Chicago actually have a lot in common in terms of how the cities are laid out, and also in turn how the politics are responding to the layout of the city. Like they're both massive and a single city, and like sort of sprawling. And it's different from, like, for instance, the Bay Area where I was living before. It's a bunch of different cities all crammed together, right? Separated by the water and all this stuff. Hills and so on. But yeah, in LA, it's the same thing. There's just like a bunch of different protests happening at any given time. Today, there's like 6 or 7 happening. I'm going to go to one of them. Yeah, I've been going to them. Yeah, but I haven't seen one of the magnitude that you were talking about in Chicago, Micah. It sounds
and there was one today that I didn't go to that was organized by some unions, like the Chicago Teachers Union, that apparently was even bigger. So we're talking like, 10,000 plus people.
Wow.
Yeah, it's amazing. In New Orleans, there's definitely like different things popping up at different times. I like the like broader left of New Orleans, there are so many different groups organizing that it's like hard to get everyone on the same page. But there's been like some bigger, like central ones that are like more largely in solidarity with just like Minneapolis in particular, and like the national and international like moment we're in. But there's also like Jefferson Parish right outside of Orleans Parish, where New Orleans is, like right across the bridge, and then also sort of like not across the bridge. The parish lines are really weird, but I mean they have, it's like some of the most racist killer cops in the world, and like there are so many like families that are like starting to come together that have like lost family members over the past couple years. And it's like, I think just now there's like some more attention being paid to that, but it's like, it's weird because like there's such immediate stuff to, people in and around New Orleans that like is a lot smaller than like the larger solidarity protests. But like, I don't know, I guess it's all part of the same thing, but it makes for a sort of strange like prioritizing you have to do with like where you put your actions. And like, with DSA here, like how we can fit in, especially because like DSA New Orleans is like a lot whiter than New Orleans. So trying to figure that all out is like, it's a juggling act for sure.
I mean, this is like essentially this, you're touching on like what the character of this moment essentially is that like, nobody saw this coming. I mean, seriously, like I thought that there would be in general that social distancing imperatives would sort of like tamp down street protest. And so I thought that the most likely street protest that you would see would be about the coronavirus response. Right. And then I sort of assumed that wouldn't happen because of the shutdown, right, because of the pandemic. And to have, in fact, street protests have in fact happened, and they're about racist police violence, which is an issue that's been obviously ongoing for like, ever, but like, it's been sort of continuous, and we haven't seen these mass demonstrations like this since Black Lives Matter. I mean, honestly, where did this come from? Like, it's quite puzzling, and it's like really fucking exhilarating, and creating so many opportunities and so much new space that we need to be like figuring out how to take advantage of. But it's also putting everyone in a position of having to like very quickly figure out what their relationships to all of the other groups are, like sort of in the post Bernie moment, in what felt previously, like literally a week and a half ago, felt like a lull in left activity. Suddenly people are scrambling to like figure out where they fit into left politics, anti-racist politics in their city.
Something that
it's a crazy moment.
Something that I've been very pleased with is that like the liberal messaging on this of like, oh, like white anarchists, sit this one out kind of shit really doesn't seem to have stuck. And I was so expecting it to stick. Like I had a moment, I'm like, 9 years into being a recovered lib or whatever. So like it had purchase, that logic had purchase on me. And it wasn't until I like did a little of my own research and dug up like the outside agitator narrative throughout history or whatever. And it like, that it like, it's the oldest trick in the fucking book, and people really seem to see it as that in a way that like there's an immunity to liberal like using identity as a hammer right now that I haven't really seen.
I think it's because like, not to give liberals too much credit, but I do think that like the idea that like you should believe the dominant voice of the group talking, like I don't know. I'm also only seeing things on Twitter, so it's filtered through that. And I think that like there's a lot of white people who are very like only do nice protests. But I also think, and I think that like liberals do tend to hear like they're like, okay, I need to listen to the person who looks like the person affected, like because that's what I'm supposed to do. And Black people who aren't necessarily like usually radicals who might vote for like Joe, who might be like a Joe Biden person, are like, fuck the police.
Yeah.
Like, and I think that like there's a lot of Black conservatives who like, and when I say conservatives, I mean like Democrats, but like people who have like conservative religious ideology. They're like conservative people, but like the cops are so racist that those people are still like, I mean, yeah, fuck the cops. You know what I mean? So I do think that like, I don't know. I think that there's a difference between like the white Bernie bro and like the idea of like saying I'm not going to vote in this election. People are still going to say that that's like a white privilege thing rather than like a choice that does consider racism. Does that make any sense? Yeah. But like for this, I think that there are enough like there's enough like people being like, no, this is bad, defund the cops. And it is cool to see people actually listening like they said they would.
Just this morning, I don't want to give them too much credit. Just this morning, like the cars bopping by and like honking the horn for what was a pretty small protest or whatever.
One
like,
lady did flip us off.
Oh, I'm sure, but like I saw a lot of like white people putting Black Power fists in the air and shit, and like and that's in Jefferson Parish, which is a like New Orleans is a blue dot in a Red Sea. Jefferson Parish is the water of the Red Sea like lapping onto New Orleans, and so like. It's, I mean, I know so many fucking gun nuts and gun nut families that like live in Jefferson Parish, and they're just itching for an excuse. Most gun owners that I know, I grew up raised by conservative parents or whatever, and they're all just dying for an excuse to fucking kill someone. And like, to have like 54% of people polled in favor of not just the protest, but burning down the fucking police precinct. like burning down a police department is polling. I mean, this is not my observation, but polling higher than Joe Biden. And so if well over half of people are supporting burning shit down, like how many people are like supporting these protests? And what we saw this morning and what we're continuing to see is like, a ton of people support this shit.
Dude, if Joe Biden really wants to win, he'll name the ashes of the 3rd precinct as his VP. It is, clear. I mean...
Or you could start saying, like, from the beginning when I got into this, I was always for burning down police stations. That's all I've always been about.
I did it. I did it, man. I was out there. I was a one match precinct man.
That's a pretty good item.
I mean, all you have to, it's easy because, like, doing impressions, the hardest part about it is, like, knowing what to say. Like, you can get the voice or the cadence or whatever, but Joe Biden, you can just
say anything.
stutter until you think of something, and then, like, you got it. It gives you time. There's, like, it's a real slow one.
Yeah, it helps if you have spare, like, if you have, like, marbles from when you were a kid to put in your mouth, but, like, if he was failing that, you can do a pretty good job.
I mean, like, it doesn't make sense that right now, like, with coronavirus, that it's more people out in the streets than ever, but it also does because, like, I think everybody knows that right now for so many different reasons. Like, I feel like tying like Bernie dropping out to this is, like, kind of missing the point in a lot of ways, but, like, that factor, like, with the whole election cycle, and then, like, the rich getting richer while everybody loses their jobs. Like, I don't know what the fuck. I don't have a job. I don't know what the fuck I'm going to be doing in, like, 6 months. Like America's never shown its ass like this in my lifetime, at least. Like, institutional trust is, like, zero. Like, even, like, boomers are, like, not, like, they don't believe what they see as much. Like, they're probably still going to, MSNBC and CNN and the New York Times and all the same, like, bullshit. But, like, I think they're at this point, like, especially since, like, millennials are getting a little older too, like, when they talk to their kids, they're talking to, like, 35-year-old millennials. So they kind of have to listen a little bit in a way that they couldn't, like, write them off before. So everyone just knows it's all bullshit. Yeah. Like, in a way that, like, makes my, like, 16-year-old self feel validated. Like, just like,
you're right. It's complete, like, crisis of legitimacy is the term that you hear people use a lot. And, like, that's the hinge. You're completely right. That's how we can connect the current moment to the end of the Bernie campaign. Like, you wouldn't want to draw too much of a direct link or be too causal about it because it doesn't really make any sense. You'd obviously be trying to shoehorn something in, to make your point or whatever. But I mean, I think that they are connected in the sense that, there was a great amount of hope on the part of lots of people that another type of government was possible. There was already an extreme, lack of trust in the institutions as they were, but there was some, hope that they could be reformed through the election of Bernie Sanders. And when he was roundly defeated, when he was squashed by the centrist consolidation that we all watched happen right before our eyes, which was, like, kind of astonishing. And then when he kind of ended up, like, disappearing from the national stage, in part eclipsed by the coronavirus crisis. And then when the coronavirus crisis showed us so clearly how bad it was going to continue to be in his absence, I do think that a lot of his supporters were, like, feeling fed up. Now, that's not everybody who's out on the streets, but, like, it's also like a pretty big chunk, to be honest, of the people who are out in the streets. I think that that's fair to say. Yeah. In fact, there was, like, cops in Chicago who were overheard on the Micah. You saw this, right? Some cops in Chicago. Yeah, some cops in Chicago were on the police radio, overheard being like, "They're all fucking Sanders supporters out of here, man."
Yeah. Well, I wore my Bernie shirt to the protest in Chicago yesterday of Bernie being arrested by the CPD.
Dude, I have that exact same shirt.
Yeah.
It's like the only...
I actually saw a bunch of Bernie merch at the protest that I went to in Boyle Heights, which is a Latino neighborhood in Los Angeles, where Bernie completely cleaned house.
Right.
And I saw a lot of, like, young Latino activist type people wearing their Bernie shirts out there at the protests. So, like, I think that we should be careful to not be like, it is the perfect continuation of blah, blah, blah. Like, obviously that's not true. That's clearly not true. And yeah, it's also not completely disconnected from it. There's clearly some rollover. And I think that you're right to pinpoint that the way that rolls over is that there's like just like a complete exasperation with and lack of faith in the institutions as they are. And then even for people who didn't like support Bernie Sanders or maybe didn't like care that much about the primary, they're staring down the barrel of a Joe Biden versus Donald Trump general election. No matter what, no matter who you are, no matter if you even paid attention to the primary, it just contributes to the idea that this is all a complete fucking farce.
Yeah.
I can't accept it still. Like, I know it's coming.
Yeah.
Like, because they haven't really squared off against each other at all yet, even though, like, especially in, like, American fucking presidential elections, like, usually that dominates, like, the news cycle. But I think they both know it's in their best interest to just not campaign. Like, they're both such like idiots. I mean, I guess Trump has skill. He can like rile his base, like because they like the way he's belligerent or whatever. But like, I think he knows somewhere, like in his like completely lack of humility, having self, that like he can't handle this.
So, Biden needs to stay quiet because he literally is not only he's incapable of saying anything that isn't grotesque, like not like he's like so out there and his brain isn't working, like he would piss off anything that he says that is not grotesque would piss off his donors and like piss off the people who you know, whatever, and so he just can't say anything. I don't know.
So I guess like sort of transitioning to talk about the book a little bit, because like it rocks. Like, you know, like a big theme of the book is like essentially the theme of the Sanders campaign, which is like the underlying not me, us. Like at the end of the day, this is like a from the bottom up, like groundswell moment is the only way things are going to change, and we have to straight up topple it. Like, how does that change now? Like, not only with Bernie dropping out in the way he did, but also like at this moment of just like rage throughout the country.
My first thought is that, I mean, so after Bernie dropped out, my first thought was like, okay, not me, us has really just become like genuinely not him, us. Like it's like actually just us now, which is like a bit, I mean, it's a bit alarming in some ways. I mean, I don't know about you guys. Sounds like it's different for everybody here. But I became an organized socialist because of the Bernie Sanders 2016 campaign. It like gave me a kick in my ass. I had sort of knew what socialism was before and like thought that it was like good and correct and that capitalism was bad and incorrect, but like hadn't really like thought of myself as a political actor in that way until the Bernie campaign the first time made me feel like, I mean, just it was a real emperor wears no clothes moment for me. And I remember just distinctly thinking like the people who are running the show are so fucking stupid. And honestly, if they're going to be that stupid and wrong, then maybe even though I'm not that smart and I don't have like all the proper training or whatever, like at least I know I'm right. So I'm going to go ahead and go toe to toe with them. Right. Like I'm going to go ahead and jump in the ring. Like that was my thought process in leading me to my first DSA meeting. I was like, yeah, we should organize something, even though we don't have lanyards or whatever. But so it's weird to be in this moment where there cannot be a Bernie Sanders presidency, because I have been an organized socialist only when it has been possible to potentially have Bernie Sanders be the president of the United States. So it was definitely an adjustment, and it felt like the not him, us, like really felt kind of heavy in a lot of ways. Luckily, I had spent, a long time with Micah leading up to it, writing this book about like how precisely we should prepare to proceed in the event that, really in any case, whether he won or whether he lost or whatever. So that helped me adjust a little bit. But, I was down in some ways for the like intervening period between when Bernie dropped out and when this jump kicked off. Micah did a really good job cheering me up on a regular basis, and I appreciate that. But now what I'm seeing is that the us is really, really big. Like if it's going to be not him, us, then like we're really lucky because we've got a really big us. We've got like a massive a volume of people who are pissed off and outraged enough they feel that they need to take action against the system, even if that's a bit inchoate or it's not entirely clear to everybody, like how precisely they would go about it. Like even if it's not even if not everybody is animated by like a really coherent political ideology or a coherent strategy or whatever, it's a lot of people who want to change things in a very radical and dramatic fashion. So that's great fucking news.
Yeah, and not only that, but the demands that are emerging out of this moment, I think, I don't know if other people feel this way. I personally have been shocked to see how, for example, the slogan of the protests, I mean, obviously a big one is Black Lives Matter, which is a broad and one that's been around for a couple of years, but also defund the police has emerged as this central demand, maybe the central demand of the movement. I'm driving around my neighborhood seeing signs in windows that definitely didn't have Bernie signs that say defund the police. I was, obviously you saw it everywhere in the protests I was at yesterday. And defund the police, I mean, every person who's holding up that slogan can't probably articulate a full program for what that's about. But I think for a lot of people, they understand that we need to stop giving so much money to police, to this repressive apparatus that is beating people's asses, killing many working class people, Black people especially, sending people to jail, and instead send that money to schools and housing and all the other things that we know that public dollars can be used for to make people's lives better. And that's incredible. And I think, again, you don't want to draw a direct line from, Bernie runs his campaign and thus these things happen. But clearly Bernie was the first time on a national stage that people heard a vision for a radical shift in how we use our public resources, and that we actually can use them to actually help people. And now you're seeing that expressed in defund the police and, fund all of the good stuff of healthcare and housing and everything else that we know that the state can be doing that would make our lives better.
The demands to the demands are no longer pre-compromised in the sort of traditional liberal approach of reform. It's not, no one on the streets is calling for fucking reform, and it's that to me is a massive difference from even a couple years ago, is that there's no capitulation before you even come to the table.
And it also
essentially go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was going to say just a specific point that they are calling for reform in Jefferson Parish because of them being so bad that body cameras are still something that they're demanding.
Right.
But in other parishes,
though, I was at a meeting with some of those people who organized that action, and it's a very new group, and I think the body cams thing is well, I mean, they already have that law on the books, they have to, but okay, enforce that. And
right.
Defund the police is also definitely very much on the table and being debated there. And it's organically, there are non-reformist reforms on the table. That's crazy. That's just coming from everybody is fuck the whole thing.
The reason why has got to be that, well, Black Lives Matter already had to go, and what emerged as it's not the leaders of Black Lives Matter did not themselves determine that the kinds of technocratic reforms to the way that policing is done should be the dominant frame of their demands. On the contrary, the movement for Black Lives, if you look at the movement for Black Lives platform, it's actually very consistent with the defund the police approach. It's just that there were other leaders in the movement who were pushing these kinds of technocratic demands, and of course the people in power were those are the real leaders, those are the leaders of Black Lives Matter, look, we're meeting with them, look, we're doing what they say, right? And those leaders were willing to play along, and so that actually kind of helped sort of fracture the movement and fizzle it out. And this time what's happening is that the other set of demands that were honed during Black Lives Matter, they have emerged as more dominant. So the question that we have to ask, if we want to understand the character of what's happening right now, is why last time did the technocratic sort of policing reforms emerge as the dominant demands, and why this time are people saying, no, we don't want to do that? I mean, yes, there's some people who still want to do that, but that D-Ray and a couple of other people, Campaign Zero, put together their 8 can't wait. It's like 8 policing reforms
roasted.
Can't wait. And people were like not having, honestly, some celebrities jumped on board and he got a little press and everything. And Obama was like, I like this. It almost immediately you saw various leaders in the current movement, which this is a very spontaneous movement. Who counts as a leader? It's hard to say, but people with a loud voice, a loud platform, including Black Lives Matter activists, including socialists who have become more prominent over the course of the Bernie campaign, who still have a large platform. There's just a lot of no, we don't, 8 can't wait. Can wait. We're going to do defund the police. This is the time to be demanding defund the police. 54% of people think that it's okay that a Minneapolis police precinct was burned down. So we're going to demand that we defund the police because it's a wasted opportunity to not do that. And I think part of it is that people saw what happened 5-6 years ago with Black Lives Matter, and they saw that things really have not changed since the implementation of those reforms. And another part of it is precisely what Micah was saying, which is that we have an increased appetite for transformational demands, in large part because Bernie Sanders has been basically campaigning for president for 5 years and therefore has commanded the attention of the nation for 5 years, has been allowed to go on various, they try to keep him off, obviously, but various mainstream media platforms for 5 years to talk about things like defunding, the police and the military explicitly, and funding social programs.
And it's he's been doing that, but also he's been one of the most disregarded members of the Senate or the House, or his entire political career. I remember being a teenager, and they would let him on he'd go on the Daily Show or something every once in a while, and I was like, how the fuck are they letting this guy on TV? And then to have that dude out of anyone be the person who is being listened to, it's clearly because it wasn't him. It was that he had an analysis of power and people dug it, and a bunch of people with no power somehow have made enough noise to have these kind of demands and this kind of approach happen. There was a sign, someone was holding up a sign that said police reform now, and everyone I was with just looked at that sign and was like, man, dude, no, you read the room, you're not, you're not doing it right. I guess the election is still going to happen. So, probably, yeah. Who fucking knows? But it's still supposed to happen.
Right.
You guys in your book talk about a dirty break from the Democrats. Maybe if you just want to sort of explain what that idea is, and then especially catered to this particular moment. In all of its craziness.
Yeah. So the idea of the dirty break comes from a basic problem of American politics, especially for those of us who are on the left. I guess it's only a problem for those of us on the left. It's actually not a problem for the right. They're beneficiaries. The problem is that we are one of the only countries in the world that doesn't have a left-wing, workers, social democratic, socialist type party that exists in the political system. We have the Democrats, who are supposed to be the left party, but as people probably know very well, they are a party that is kind of fundamentally a capitalist party. They're a party that has big capitalist donors as a huge part of its donor base, and the people who make up the party are this very strange mixture of oil and water, which is of working class interests, people like labor unions, and also other progressive constituencies like feminists and environmentalists and civil rights focused people, along with people who are getting huge donations from Wall Street and from health insurance companies. Meagan has put it, the Blue Cross Blue Shield executives are supposed to get along within the same party as the people who represent people who are denied by Blue Cross Blue Shield.
Right.
So it's this strange situation we're in, and a lot of people over the last century or so have struggled to figure out how to deal with this on the left. And some people have said, okay, obviously the Democrats are a bourgeois party, they're a capitalist party, we don't want anything to do with them, so we're going to just split from them and form this other workers' party that we know that we need. And obviously we don't have an example to point to of that anybody can think of off the top of their head that's been particularly successful, because those attempts have fallen really flat on their face. They haven't really gone anywhere. On the other hand, people who are good progressives or leftists, socialists, whatever, have attempted to go into the Democratic Party saying this is the only game in town, so we're going to try our hand here, even though we know we don't like the Democrats, but we're gonna go for it. And they've been basically absorbed by the Democratic Party apparatus. And so the dirty break strategy is one that tries to learn the lessons of both of those things. And is one that sees the eventual goal as breaking with the Democratic Party and forming our own working class party, but sees the path to getting there as ironically going through the party. And Bernie himself shows this perfectly, because Bernie obviously never was a formal member of the Democratic Party. He never joined. He was always, Bernie Sanders, Vermont independent, but he ran for the Democratic Party and presidential nomination. And one of the things that came out of that, I think, is that ironically, the Democratic Party lost legitimacy in the eyes of millions of people, because here was this guy who was not proposing anything radical. He wasn't saying that he wanted to establish the dictatorship of the proletariat. Like, he was arguing for Medicare for all and free college. And yet this party apparatus did everything that we know that it did to destroy him. And so I think that raised a lot of questions in people's mind about what the hell is up with this party that is supposed to be the left-wing party, and yet this is what they do in response to even tepid progressive demands. Or in this case, of this current moment, like, we all know that people like Joe Biden played very key roles in building the mass incarceration and over-policing regime that we live under. And so people understand that, like, the Democratic Party has been just about as bad as the Republicans in terms of creating this situation where people like George Floyd are being murdered in the street by police officers. So we think that, like, it's essential going forward to maintain that level of, like, understanding the Democratic Party are not your friends, that at least people in the highest levels, the leadership of the Democratic Party, they are fundamentally at the highest level bought off by the sort of right-wing, not right-wing, but sort of capitalist interests of our society. And any path going forward has to involve really coming into very open conflict with those forces if we're going to move forward to make progressive change.
That's the basics of it. I mean, to underscore, Micah and I think that we're of the sort of political persuasion that you need to have an independent working class party, or an independent labor party that advances the interests of the working class, or an independent socialist party. You can sort of like see various permutations of what kind of party it would be, but an independent pro-working class electoral expression needs to exist. And by independent, what we mean is not a cross-class coalition with, and the reason, and this kind of imperative comes from a Marxist analysis. So if you are a Marxist, you understand that the working class and the capitalist class have interests that are diametrically opposed to one another. So if the worker makes a higher wage, the capitalist loses profits. If the worker gets more time off, the capitalist loses profits, right? So it's and that's the basics of it. And because of that diametric opposition and class interests, it is necessary if you want to advance the interests of the working class, which according to Marxists are in fact ultimately the interests of all of humanity, and it's the way that you sort of like bring about social change of any kind on a mass scale. Then you need to have an independent working class party. All right, so that's where we're starting from. However, the dirty break is different from a clean break. A clean break says, okay, I get all of that, now let's go do it. And a dirty break says, we need to figure out how to do it in a way that doesn't doom us to irrelevance, because we need to not merely have a party in name, we need to have a party and function. It has to have a mass character. That's kind of the main thing that differentiates the dirty break strategy from the clean break strategy, is that we need to be able to feel confident that when we build our own independent electoral expression, that we have a constituency that's large enough for it, that we're not merely dooming ourselves to irrelevance and actually losing our ability to interface with mass numbers of working class people. Because that's the point of the whole thing anyway, right? Is like, we want to get as many working class people into our thing as possible, which means, as Micah explained, that for the time being, it is strategic to continue to antagonize Democrats inside of the Democratic Party, to erode the loyalties of Democratic voters who should not be loyal to people like Joe Biden and should instead have different opinions, right? And then prepare them for an exit into a different kind of formation.
Yeah, I mean, I guess this, you don't even really hear this nearly as much as you used to, and I think the reasons why are obvious, but like people who are completely against socialists engaging in electoralism, like, I think at this point it's laughable to say that it's not worth it, because like, look at where we were in 2014. Like, if you don't think that is about as close as of a 1-to-1 thing as you can get, then I don't know what you're looking at. Like, it sucks that most Americans, like, way that they internally engage with politics, like, because your whole life is externally engaging with politics, but internally I think most Americans just think about politics in terms of elections. And like, you can't circumvent that. Like, that is too ingrained in people's heads to be able to just be like, well, we can organize our workplaces that well without any sort of electoral approach to this, without like capturing the imagination of an entire country through like a presidential campaign. And like, now it sucks because like, we're gonna have to have so many state, local, campaigns, so many ballot measures, things like that have this sort of like somewhat like antagonistic approach, but they, our media isn't set up to have those things matter to people as much as a presidential campaign, which really sucks. But like how do we deal with that? Like, that we don't have another presidential campaign for 4 years to really like throw our weight behind.
You gotta keep an eye out for opportunities, I think. I mean, Mike and I wrote this book to try to give socialists a sense of some guidelines for how to go about doing politics in the absence of a Bernie Sanders campaign, right? I personally am of the opinion that we're out of the presidential politics game for a while. Like, I don't think we have anybody waiting in the wings. And you know what? Presidential politics is different from other politics. It has different capacities and possibilities, as we've seen. But like, that's over for a minute. Like, I don't think we're going to have anybody running for president who's capable of filling the role that Bernie Sanders was able to fill for a while. So we need to figure out something else to do. Micah and I basically tried to come up with a set of guidelines for what to do. And of course, part of that is electoral. There are people, you don't hear it, nearly as much, like you said, because it seems kind of silly given everything, but you do hear it occasionally, especially since Bernie Sanders dropped out. You'll hear some people being like, see, it didn't work. And it's like, well, no, it didn't work to get him to be the president, but it worked to like regenerate a renewed like American socialist movement. So as Micah likes to say, he lost, but he didn't fail. Right. And so we do think that electoral politics is critical, and we try to give a set of guidelines for how to go about engaging in electoral politics. And we call that theory of engagement, class struggle elections, which you guys would recognize from the DSA convention last year, because there was a resolution that was passed on class struggle elections. So Mike and I just tried to flesh it out. But then it's also the case that you need to do non-electoral politics. I mean, the idea that you need to privilege one over the other is silly. Look, like sometimes there are elections coming up, and then you should try to have people who are running in elections who are like promoting class struggle ideas and like building the capacities of the working class. And then other times there aren't elections happening. And during those times, you should definitely be giving your energy to other things. So, for specifically, Mike and I, well, like right now, for example, obviously everybody's attention needs to be on the protest movement in the streets, right? Because it's happening. You can't be there's a fine line between being an opportunist, which you don't want to be, you sort of creepy person who like pops up periodically and is like, hey, what are you guys doing? Seems cool. Can I get in on that? You want to sign up for my group? But then at the same time, I mean, you've got to keep an eye out for opportunities. Like you have to just ride the waves of like mass outrage mass political activity. And then so we think protest movements are critical when they occur. You got to be in there. But also in terms of long-term strategy, the book really emphasizes that the labor ort has got to be where it's at in terms of non-electoral activity.
You talk a lot about demonstrating value rather than sort of trying to like give everyone a Marxist education against their will or whatever. You just like show up and help them with their strike or whatever. And then if anyone asks you what you think, then you can fucking tell them. And like, and you will have already proved that you're like down and like a friend at that point. Can you talk a little bit? Go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, like everybody knows the kind of to the extent that people are familiar with Marxists. They're mostly familiar with people who, show up to try to commandeer things, to try to, grab the momentum of a moment to opportunistically, nail a few people who they can bring into their organization, and they're obviously there to build up their own little like sectarian grouplet rather than actually participate in good faith in building this movement. But like that is the exact opposite of the way that socialists should go about these kinds of struggles. And like we obviously think that socialists have something that is important to bring to struggles. We make the argument that like what happened to George Floyd is also tied to like the structural role of police in society. It's tied to the yawning inequality in our society. It's tied to the decline of the social welfare state in our society. We have things to say about all that stuff, but fundamentally our task should be to be there and participate as good faith participants who want to see the movement grow, because we think that the growth of such movements is what makes the world change. Not us showing up like a fundamentalist Christian, like waving a Bible that we're like beating people with, like taking Capital Volume 1 and like hitting people over the head with it. Like that's not what social. That's you're a shitty organizer if you do that. You're not a good participant in social change, and also nobody likes you. No one will want to be around you, and they will see you and they will run in the opposite direction. When socialists are acting in the way that they've done at their best historically, like as I said, they're good faith participants in building movements, and then they're playing, because they're seen first and foremost as good faith participants. Then they're able to play a role in moving those movements forward.
I think that's right, and I think that it's like kind of irritating sometimes to hear that you can't do too much of one thing, but you also can't do too much of the opposite thing. And I feel like I find myself saying that over and over again, and maybe it's unsatisfying, but I also think that's literally the definition of politics, is like understanding that you need to be able to feel out, like have a sort of like intuition about your political climate and not go too far in one direction or the other. And so it's also true that what Micah said is completely accurate. It is very true that you need to earn your ability to exert leadership. At the same time, it is also true that socialists are not merely like allies to other movements. We have a distinct perspective, and we're not here to just be helpful. We think that we have to earn our ability to lead, but we also think that when it's time, we need to step up. When we have earned our ability to lead, we should in fact step up and provide leadership. So and we have to be preparing for that in the form of like preparing ourselves to be leaders, right? And like developing political perspectives that we think are, accurate and like useful in our own organization, so that we're actually creating a cadre of potential leaders so that when we've like earned the trust of, various pockets of the working class, then we can actually step into that. So like, for example, good example, and it's in the book, is the story of East Bay DSA and the leadership development that we did over the course of an electoral campaign that we then turned around and were able to use during the Oakland teachers strike. Like, we were able to not merely be like excellent community partners and allies, but some members of our organization were actually like very involved in the Oakland teachers strike. A part of that was that they had developed their own leadership capacities over the course of the previous work that we had done as a chapter. And another part of it is that some of them, including my partner, who's a teacher, went and just started, doing like literally having the same job as the people who ended up going on strike, right? Like Micah talks about this a lot. This is sort of a cornerstone of what is called the rank and file strategy, which is a much broader thing. But this is the concept of industrialization, which means going and getting a job in an industry where that shit is eventually bound to pop off, and actually taking seriously that job, really genuinely making it your life. Don't get a job that you don't like and wouldn't want to make your life out of. But then also, that's like a big part of earning people's trust. When things do eventually pop off, you can say, I'm not just like a socialist who's like sniffing around the edges of this strike. I'm like a teacher and I'm on strike with you,
Yeah.
Micah can explain it further if
no, yeah. I mean, the goal here, as we've already said, is to not be outsiders who are bringing the gospel truth to people from the outside, but to be at the center of where the action is. That's like what socialists, our task is to do, is to like be where the action is. I mean, in the case of what Meagan is talking about in the rank and file strategy, like being actually embedded in shop floors across the country in places where there are, there's opportunities for labor organizing of certain kinds, and like, socialists have a role to play in pushing those in a more progressive direction, and in making the union fight for more than just bread and butter, but also for like the entire working class. Like that's socialists historically have played key roles in making unions fight, making unions the best version of themselves, like to be able to fight for affordable housing and for fully funded schools, and to stop over policing of schools if you're like a teachers union, right? Like that's the best version of teachers unionism. And so socialists have a really key role to play in that, and across a bunch of different struggles, not as finger waggers, but as like good faith participants and actually good organizers.
I mean, it does seem that like I think the rank and file strategy makes a lot of sense. I think there is a specific hesitation towards it when it comes to teachers that is like very valid, like especially if you look at like New Orleans, where it's like all charter schools and it's all a bunch of like white kids from like out of state coming in. Like, I know that's not a like deliberate like people aren't coming in like because of their rank and file socialists and like they're infiltrating. But even if they were, I think it looks pretty similar. And like there are, like, I think there's a sort of like entryism component of that like you should be like kind of like wary of, even if you are engaging in that sort of strategy.
Yeah, that's definitely a concern. On the other hand, we're at a moment, it's 2020. Like, it's not like a bunch of DSA members are, they're looking at their lives and they're like, should I go get this PhD, which will give me a cushy tenure track academic job, or should I go instead like proletarianize? Like the people, we're all broke. I mean, like DSA members are mostly downwardly mobile. Like the economic opportunities that are available to us are not great, in case anybody hasn't noticed. And so like we shouldn't like self-flagellate too much, just thinking we have so much privilege and we're like slumming it or whatever and trying to get jobs. Like so many of us aren't able to get decent jobs, and so it makes sense that we would, like, if we could become teachers, like that would be a big step up for a lot of us. So I think the whatever are the specifics of most of the class backgrounds of most DSA members, like most of us are in a position now where we are needing to find jobs like that in order to survive in our day-to-day lives. And also, the other important part of this strategy is that fundamentally, people often associate it with the tactic of getting a job in order to organize at a given workplace. But even at a broader level, at like a 30,000-foot view, what it's really about is about rebuilding the link between the socialist movement and the working class that used to exist, pre-McCarthyism, basically, but was severed. And we have to rebuild that link. And so, through DSA members, for example, getting jobs in strategic industries and as nurses or as teachers or as logistics workers or whatever makes sense in a given location. I mean, the hope is obviously also that we would have organic ties to the working class and the working class movement and be embedded within the working class, and then bring people in, our coworkers. You're a white DSA member who's a teacher in Oakland, teaching in what is assumedly a majority student of color and probably a majority teacher of color district. Hopefully your colleagues of color would see what the role you played in organizing for the Oakland teacher strike, and want to join the group that you are a part of that led you to be such a good organizer in that strike. So that's also a key part of that strategy, is about recognizing that the socialist movement right now does not reflect the kind of demographics of the American working class, and working to change it through embedding ourselves on shop floors and being being seen as good organizers and good workers and good organizers on our shop floors.
For sure. I just we did start late. I just wanted to check in, make sure everyone's still good to keep going for a while time-wise.
Yeah, just for a little while maybe, because I actually am going to go out to another protest here in a bit, but happy to talk for another 10 minutes, 10, 15.
Cool. There's definitely one thing I wanted to get y'all's take on. So we had Nathan Robinson from Current Affairs on almost a year ago or something like that. And I asked him basically this question, but I'm going to frame it a little bit differently, because you talk about the dirty break strategy with the Democrats, and I'm interested in your take on because the media is so powerful and corporate media has such a stronghold on everything, working for Jacobin or Current Affairs or something like that, is there a broader media strategy we should have? There are these small little left publications that can do what they can do and are clearly more effective than, say, the Green Party, but it's still it's not enough yet. What is the larger strategy there?
I love that Jacobin is always this is a complete side note. Micah can answer this question better than I can. But first, I want to say that Jacobin's perceived power is always proportional to how angry people are at it at any given time. So people are I saw there was a flurry of tweets about how Jacobin editors were declining to outright endorse Joe Biden for president, and it sort of implied that we were going to take down Joe Biden's chances. And it's if that were the case, don't you think that Bernie Sanders would be the nominee right now?
Yeah,
really. For the guy. Anyway, Micah can answer this question.
Yeah, obviously this is a critical question. And I guess I would just start first by saying the typical sort of Noam Chomsky manufacturing consent type analysis of the corporate media is true, right? They are our enemy in large part. The corporate media exists to amplify narratives that are friendly to corporations and all of that stuff. But we've also seen in the last few years that there are some opportunities that exist for leftists to get their voice out there. And part of it can come through somebody like a Nathan or a Bhaskar Sankara who founded Jacobin as just being uniquely people who hustle. But it's also a function of when we build a left movement that is large and in the streets and is yelling our message from the mountaintops, the corporate media to some extent can't ignore us. And we've certainly made some real inroads in the mainstream media over the last couple of years. I mean, the gosh dang New York Times had Meagan writing an op-ed one day a week for a whole week, like 2 years ago. Like who would have expected something like that would have happened? But the overall, so I say all that to just say there are like some opportunities there that maybe didn't seem to exist at other times. But that said, clearly the mainstream media, I mean, like, I think that maybe even more, they played a larger role in sinking the Bernie campaign than maybe even the Democratic establishment did.
Yeah.
I mean, like my parents are progressive people, for example, but every time I would call them and talk about Bernie, like they'd be saying some line about him that was just weird. And I was like, where did they get this? And then when I don't have MSNBC at home. I came home to visit my parents, and I started like watching MSNBC with them.
Yeah.
And they're just saying the exact same thing. They're like, my parents. I'm like, oh, my parents were just parroting what they heard on MSNBC.
Yeah.
And I was like, you guys are this like direct line that corporate media has into your brains is like really terrifying thing to see. So that's going to continue to be a major obstacle for us. And to be fair, Nathan Robinson for a little while was talking about trying to start a socialist TV network, which God bless him for that. But I can't say I have a whole lot of hope that we're at least like on the level of an MSNBC or a CNN going to be able to compete on that level anytime soon. So, the
people would love his outfits.
Yeah, that's true. He's ready. He's like camera ready.
Yeah.
But for now, I mean, like, we certainly need to be building up the independent media institutions that we do have. Like, I mean, it's funny to think that Bernie got as far as he did, and who did he have like pretty steadfastly in his corner? It was like Jacobin, current affairs, a couple podcasts. Like, it really wasn't much, but we like did a lot with this fledgling independent media infrastructure that we built. So that independent media infrastructure is going to be crucial going forward. And just to briefly say that those of us who work for such structures, for such independent media outlets, we don't want your plaudits. We don't want you to like say, "Oh, thank you for your service." We don't want you to treat us like troops. But like, we all do make sacrifices because we believe that these independent media institutions are critical to build. And like, Meagan and I would not be here, having worked for Jacobin for years, if we hadn't made a decision a long time ago to like forego all kinds of things, money and all kinds of other stuff, because we felt like it's absolutely critical to build up institutions like this to put forward a left-wing message. So these institutions can't exist without the support of like average leftists, because we're not getting money from corporate advertisers or big foundations or anything like that. We're dependent on leftists reading us and supporting us.
I think the lesson from current affairs is that if you're going to start a new leftist periodical, name it something like News or or thoughts,
contemporary happenings.
Dude, anyway, go on.
I think there's a bit of this analysis that I want to touch on too, because now is the moment to really think about to do your sort of autopsies of the Bernie campaign. I have seen some really weird autopsies of the Bernie campaign come out that I don't agree with at all. I'm of the mind not that that there were, I think that there were errors in the campaign, but I actually just think that the like macro structural features of our political landscape were the reason why we were not able to make a democratic socialist become the president of the United States without like a institutional or organized left. But in any case, we have to understand, we have to do our autopsies. And I think that one of the major things that happened was not just that the media was strong, but that the media was uniquely strong among Democratic Party primary voters, precisely because Donald Trump has waged a war on what he calls mainstream media, by which he means CNN and MSNBC. He doesn't mean Fox News, even though Fox News is every bit of the corporate and mainstream media as the others. And this has caused Republicans' faith in the mainstream media to plummet. And it has caused a backlash. It has caused loyal Democrats' faith in the mainstream media in response to what has occurred among Republicans to actually skyrocket. So whereas before they looked much more similar, like everybody's kind of like iffy on like MSNBC and CNN and Fox News, everybody has their opinions or whatever. Now you've got a situation where Donald Trump is talking about the fake news this and the corporate media that. He doesn't say corporate, he says mainstream media that. And then he also talking about failing New York Times and all this stuff. And you have a defensive reaction from loyal Democrats who are now like buying all this fucking bullshit, this hokey bullshit that you see. The Washington Post is like democracy dies in darkness. And like there's this strong affective pull toward the mainstream media that is a cultural phenomenon that is occurring, unfortunately, among the exact slice of the population that you need to win over to win a particular contest, which is the fucking Democratic Party primary. You don't have to deal with it as much in the general election, but the Democratic Party primary, who votes in that? Loyal Democrats. What are loyal Democrats thinking right now about CNN and MSNBC? These are the last bastions of truth in our democracy.
It is my political obligation to turn off my critical thinking skills. And if you
criticize them in any way, then you love Donald Trump.
You're just like Trump. Blah, blah, fake news, this, that. And you're a despot and a tyrant who hates the free press and all this. And so this was a unique climate. This was not like a thing that is constantly happening. This was like a thing that was not even happening in 2016. This is a thing that was a special little obstacle for us to get over in 2020. And it was very, very hard to get over this particular obstacle. And it could change in the future. I mean, nobody knows where these kinds of things are going to be headed. Maybe if Donald Trump exits the picture, that changes the dynamic. Who knows? But I just wanted to enter that in there as like an important slice of analysis for us when we're thinking about the media's role in all of this. And another thing that I want to say, which is switching gears slightly, is like we on the left need to just understand that what Micah said is true, that there are actually little cracks available for us in the mainstream media instead of imagining it as a fortress in our minds, because that's not actually the case, in part because these companies are run by people who are not like they're companies, and they're run by CEOs, and they want profit, they want subscriptions, they want profit, they want ad money, etc. The whole deal. But there are other people working for these news outlets, and especially in print, I would say at a place like the New York Times, for example, some of these people are like liberals. Actually, most of them are liberals, and sometimes liberals are sympathetic to ideas to their left for personal reasons, and that has to do with the cultural climate, the political climate that we can help create. And when that happens, and when you see a crack of light, you have to actually you have to stick your foot in the door before it closes, And so I think it's important for us to actually, the reason I'm bringing all this up is because there's a big, strong 1990s era, don't be a sellout man kind of attitude on the left that I think is actually it's not compatible with the other thing that I just said, which is trying to exploit opportunities to get our message in front of as many people as possible. On the left, I find that people are really grumpy and grumbly about if people get too big of a platform, blah, blah, blah. I know this kind of sounds like a little bit like me saying that people should be nicer to me. I just want to... No, I'm really genuinely trying to offer a useful analysis here. Yeah. I do think that we should build a culture where we're pushing people to the fore and trying to get people on as big of a stage as possible. Bhaskar tries to make the rounds as much as he can. I think he's an excellent spokesperson. I think Nathan does this too. And just think about this. Think about Cornel West going on CNN to talk about riots. That was fucking critical. That was so critical. Yeah. And we just need to be building a culture on the left that encourages the creation and fostering of more leaders like that who can, because he's not going to be around forever to be available for Anderson Cooper to call, for him to go tell the American people how this completely delegitimizes the entire political establishment. So we need to be taking this seriously. I think they did a lot better in the UK. In Britain, the left has their people that are called upon to be the spokespeople for the left perspective.
I mean, but look at how they did Corbyn. That was even
Yeah, their media is worse, and they also have better, like, they have better guns for the left in the media, but their media is also like even worse than ours.
I think you're right, and like people do need to. I mean, it's very much like Bernie's political career, as you guys talk about in the book. But like when you see those opportunities to like kind of be an outsider on the inside, like you can do that effectively. Don't totally sell out. Like try and get in there, try and amplify your voice. But I still think, to a certain extent, there does have to be like at the same time you're doing that, you also have to go on assault. Like they are such class enemies and they're so strong that like I feel like you have to be able to figure out how to use them at the same time that like eventually you have to tear them down. Like they are like, I don't think we can win if they exist in the current form that they are in. And it's like it seems almost like more difficult to have like an insurrectionary campaign against the media than it does in politics. And like both are very hard, but like, yeah, I don't know, man. Like
one thing that's kind of nice is that they are sort of structurally obligated to try to appeal to the audience as it grows, like the left audience as it grows. Like they're kind of like, their hands are kind of tied. If the New York Times thinks that it could get 10,000 more readers or whatever, they'll do it. They'll hire Liz Brunig or whatever to throw us a bone, but however small that bone may be, she's very short. But anyway, yeah.
We need taller people. We need taller people writing for the New York Times.
Yeah, we need that guy dressed as like Master Chief, who's like 8 feet tall, that everyone wants to fuck, even though his face is not visible in the video.
Well, long story short, we don't have like the silver bullet on the media question, but it's like very critical for us to be thinking about. I think that the 2020 primary helped leftists understand what they were up against with regards to the mainstream media in a way that no other single event has up to this point. And that's actually just really useful. And I think a lot of the Bernie primary was like that. I think a lot of it was like a fact-finding mission. Like, we have information now that we didn't have. One other piece of information: Latinos are fucking ready for progressive and democratic socialist politics. That was not common knowledge across the United States until Bernie Sanders' campaign acted like a sort of like a die, sort of like that we could use to sort of trace out the political proclivities of different groups. And we discovered this like incredible reality, which is that Latinos, especially in the Western states, are like totally fucking down for democratic socialism. Micah?
I was just going to say, on the media question, it's mostly bad news, but one of the things that bums me out personally the most about the Bernie's campaign ending as early as it did is that we actually were getting some victories. Like Chris Matthews had to resign from MSNBC because he like went too far in attacking Bernie. That's awesome. Like we did that, fam. Like that was us. Like people were like, you can't just say that the Jewish socialist is a Nazi. And this like one of the key anchors of the most important liberal news station in the country had to resign over it. Like it would have been nice to see what other victories we could have racked up in the mainstream media if he had stayed in longer.
Didn't Chris Matthews also assault someone? No?
I don't know.
I made it up.
I'm gonna say yes because no one can.
You say that, yeah.
No one can fire me from anything, so I'll just say yeah, sure.
Megan, how are you doing on time, Megan?
Sorry.
How are you doing on time?
He does have that vibe, but
he definitely has that vibe.
Yeah. I think we gotta wrap it up.
Cool. So do you guys have anything to plug besides the book, Bigger Than Bernie? Everyone should go read it. Everyone should buy it. Anything else to plug?
I'll just mention that we are trying to do as much, multimedia as possible. Obviously, we've got stuff every week in print and Jacobin. We have we have our online stuff, two print journals, Jacobin and Catalyst. But we also have this YouTube web series that we've been doing called Stay at Home that it's been pretty great. I think we're doing like political education lectures like multiple times a week. We've got podcasts on Jacobin Radio. So we have all kinds of stuff for you to consume. We're trying to, put out stuff that is of use to people who are actually trying to build a better world. So that please consume it, and please use it for such purposes.
All right.
I also think, just to underscore something here, like, I think people should remind themselves to read Jacobin articles. Like, people who think of themselves as Jacobin listeners, I actually think that they should remind themselves to read Jacobin articles, because I do this, where I'm like I know what's being published in Jacobin, right? But if I haven't actually read the articles, maybe I don't, right?
Right.
There's like a kind of, I think of all of our we have like our quote unquote readers, but I actually think it's more of like our milieu. And like people who think of themselves as people who agree with Jacobin. Honestly, there's so much good stuff being published on Jacobin every day. Seriously, like, go read it. I have to remind myself to do this on a regular basis. There's incredible articles being published on Jacobin's website.
We're publishing 40 to 50 articles a week. So there's a lot of stuff out there.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Well, thank y'all so much. This kicked ass. We love you, Kate Root.
And we're
thank you.